Okay, finally, we're now going to touch on training and how to potentially look to improve your quality of training from a programming perspective to facilitate whatever goal you may have physically, whether it be a cardiovascular-based goal, whether it be of course, acquisition of muscle tissue-based goal, strength goal, etc. We'll dive into this step by step. So most individuals that I work with, of course, want to incorporate strength training frequently in order to build their physique and improve their quality of strength and, again, their response to resistance training. However, their training previously hasn't been particularly great as a result of their mismanagement of recovery, poor management of recovery. Also furthering that, their training volume and mismanagement in that respect in terms of either too little or too much, which impedes their ability to recover and actually facilitate a hypertrophic response to stress. Also, in terms of biomechanics, is something which most people mismanage and is very, very poor. So we'll dive into that first, and we can then potentially look into other variables like, of course, how to proceed with a cardiovascular goal, aerobic goal like running, half marathons, etc. So first and foremost, on screen, you guys can see an example of a training protocol I put together from my clients, Jeremy. As you can see in this instance, this individual is hitting 5 sessions per week, and these sessions do rotate, they do change. So he's not hitting these sessions in this order exactly every single week. They will vary, and we have different variations of each. As you can see, we've got pull C programs, we've got push A2, legs B2, we have A1 variations of those sessions, A variations of those sessions, etc., in which we incorporate different moving patterns, which we are, of course, ensuring there's progressive overload experienced every single week on those movements to facilitate acquisition of strength and, of course, a hypertrophic response in terms of muscle tissue. So if this individual specifically, they came to work with me having been slightly detrained for the past year. They were previously a collegiate athlete, and then they actually became somewhat lethargic and lazy as a result of wanting to operate their business and push and scale their business, which again is the same for most individuals I work with. And we're now pushing him progressively back into training and resistance training. So I've worked with him now for about 12 weeks. We're now working together for another 12 weeks moving forward. And in this previous programming, we only incorporated 10 to 15 working sets per muscle group per week in his strength program. Okay. So as opposed to him going in and blasting chest, blasting back, blasting back, blasting biceps, shoulders, whatever it may be, his legs, and adding excessive amounts of volume into a session, we only program for 10 to 15 working sets across the week, in most instances across 2 sessions. So 2 leg sessions per week, 2 push sessions per week, and 2 pull sessions per week. And therefore in total, he was hitting between 5 to 7 to 8 working sets per body part per session. Okay, now the reason for this is because this individual, having been detrained, will experience a massive benefit in terms of hypertrophic response to any form of stimulus, any volume, and will reap benefit from low volume in their training sessions initially. We also need to take into account their recovery. If I were to dump loads of training volume on him and incorporate 4 working sets every single movement, 5 working sets, excessive length of duration in terms of training sessions, that would massively negatively impact his recovery. And therefore, of course, in terms of his response from a strength perspective, that will be impeded, okay? So progressively, we've increased from 10 to 15 working sets per body part per week to now we're increasing from 15 to 20 working sets per week. And that's our primary focus within the next 12-week phase to increase his volume further progressively throughout this mesocycle. So if I go through to his program, I'll talk you guys through this progressively. So in weeks 1 to 4, we're going to be working on the accumulation of tension through a descending rep scheme, which I'll talk you through in a second. And also we're looking to actually increase the loads throughout the sets, hitting, again, peak intensity as we look to increase the load utilized in each working set as the reps descend, which I'll talk you through. The phase of this training protocol specifically is split into 3 cycles, each cycle progressing in volume, proximity to failure in terms of intensity of working sets, and also stimulus via accentuated pause where tension is greatest. So as an example, in this week 1 session, we've got flat dumbbell press as the first movement. In terms of rep scheme, we've got 10 reps for the first set, 8 reps for the second, and 6 reps for the third. And therefore, each set, he is accumulating load. He is actually utilizing a heavier weight. So for example, in set 1, he may have used 30 kilos. For set 2, where he's performing 8 repetitions, he may have used 32 kilos. And for set 3, he may have used 34 kilos. As the reps descend, he increases the load, okay? Now, over the next few weeks, we're increasing from 3 working sets all the way up to 4 working sets, depending on his ability to recover and respond positively to that training stimulus. And therefore, of course, we're looking to increase volume applied to his chest as a body part specifically over the coming 4 to 12 weeks as well. Okay, so what I've incorporated in this program here, as we can see, is training cues for each movement pattern to ensure that biomechanically, he's performing each movement optimally, which is really important. And most individuals tend to neglect the significance of form when it comes to their training, or rather haven't had an individual analyze it on their behalf. As you can see, I've also incorporated movement demonstrations for each movement for that individual to ensure that they have something to reference as an ideal example of form. That's really important also. And this applies to all movement patterns. This also ensures that individuals that I work with can also upload their own training videos into TrueCoach, which is the platform I use to coach them through their training. And therefore, of course, I can actually assess their biomechanics also on a weekly basis and ensure they're applying load and stimulus correctly, and therefore, of course, facilitating their physique progressions as fast as they possibly can do, or in the manner that they'd like to achieve. Okay, so again, it could be muscle gain, it could be maintenance of weight, it could be strength increases, whatever the goal is. I can actually monitor that and ensure biomechanically they're performing things optimally. They've got a base level of form, at least, to perform the movement with, and therefore, of course, can facilitate their goal. That's really important. So if you are writing up your own training protocols, make sure you are aware of the significance of volume. Again, initially, if you're coming from a detrained perspective, you are an individual that hasn't been in the gym for a long period of time, and you've not been hitting workouts frequently, I'd encourage you to incorporate 10 to 15 working sets per muscle group per week. As you respond positively and you see strength gains and you notice that you actually are recovering more effectively, which should be indicated by your HRV if you are tracking your HRV through your Oura Ring. If your HRV starts to increase or stays exactly the same, you're recovering well, which is great. You can then start to add further volume to your training sessions. You can push from 15, maybe up to 20 working sets per body part, depending on the body part, okay? Depending on, of course, your muscular imbalances, which variables or which areas of your physique you're really looking to pull up and bring up as well, okay? Other individuals that I work with, they have a more specific cardiovascular goal, okay? So as an example, I'm going to pull up one of the Zaveriuk twins here. So these two twins that I work with that run an e-commerce education business, and they are based in Canada, and let's pull up one of their weeks of training. So this individual, currently speaking, is hitting about 5 to 6 sessions per week, and their objective is to maintain their quality of strength, their level of strength in the gym, and we incorporate a push session, a pull session, and a low body session every single week to facilitate that. And they also have the objective moving forward of hitting a half marathon in May, okay? Now, in order to facilitate that and ensure that they're actually performing well when it comes to half marathon training, and of course, in the actual half marathon event itself, they perform at the best of their ability, we're incorporating 2 types of cardiovascular sessions to their training every single week. An aerobic session, which is a very easy, low intensity session, and then an interval or tempo-based session. So, as an example, this individual on Wednesday hit an easy run, in which they actually replaced it for a bike, but it was programmed for a run, but it was snowing in Canada, so they couldn't hit it on the track. This would be 9 kilometers at an easy pace, maintaining a heart rate of 150 BPM throughout, which puts them in zone 2 to zone 3, which enables them to build up an aerobic base, which is really important when it comes to ensuring that you can perform well on a cardiovascular level. And it prevents them from going out on that easy run, which is meant to be an easy run, on the 9 kilometers and going and blasting it, which would be the last thing in the world they should be doing, and doesn't actually help them build their aerobic base. Whereas most individuals that go to look to hit a half marathon or a marathon simply go towards every session, full pace, full intensity. They get injured very quickly, their aerobic base is not built, they experience shin splints, knee issues, ankle issues, etc. Nothing positive. You must ensure that if you have a cardiovascular goal like a half marathon or a marathon, that you are incorporating easy sessions more frequently than your high intensity sessions, which would be your interval and tempo work. Okay, so for me personally, I also have the objective of hitting my half marathons and marathons this year, and lots of cardiovascular work is being done. I'm personally incorporating 5 cardiovascular sessions on top of my 5 resistance training sessions per week. 3 to 4 of those cardiovascular sessions are my aerobic work, between 10, 15, maybe 20 kilometers at a heart rate of about 150 BPM in zone 2 to 3. They're nice and easy, and they help me build my aerobic base and also actually train me to help regulate my step cadence and mitigate any injury in terms of impact on my lower body, whether it be shin splints, knees, ankles, etc. Okay, one of those sessions or 2 of those sessions per week will then be my interval and high intensity work, in which I'm performing at an anaerobic threshold where my BPM is reaching 180, 190 BPM. And in this instance, this week specifically, this individual incorporated 4 times 1.5 kilometer intervals performed at RPE 8, so pretty much flat out. And what we're looking to do in those 1.5k intervals is perform at what would be their 5k kilometer pace. So let's say they hit a 5k in 20 minutes, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. That'd be a 4-minute kilometer. And therefore, for 1.5 kilometer interval, we're looking for them to hit that in about 6 minutes and match their 5 kilometer intensity and pace, their 5 kilometer PB intensity and pace. Okay. And that builds up their anaerobic threshold or ability to actually push and, of course, increase their heart rate as well. So these are really important variables to pay attention to when it comes to facilitating either a physique goal or a training specific goal, again, half marathons, cardiovascular work, etc. And you must also pay attention to your recovery by utilizing a tool like an Oura Ring, if you have access to it and if you do decide to purchase one, to monitor your ability to respond to the stress being inflicted upon your body from your training and your level of intensity. So if this individual, if their HRV starts to decrease and push closer towards 60 ms, 50 ms, that would be indicative of the amount of stress their body is under being too much, too overwhelming, and therefore they need to potentially pull back on their volume and intensity of training sessions, decrease their intensity and their volume, and also look to further improve their recovery by optimizing all variables of their sleep and making sure they're well fueled for their training sessions from an adequate caloric intake perspective and also from a food source perspective as well. Really important variables to pay attention to. But if you guys have got any questions on training specifically, again, you can drop me a message on social media. I'm going to be choosing loads of content about that on YouTube as well. I'll answer all of your questions. But I very much encourage you to make sure that you are aware of these variables when it comes to really dialing in your training programming. And make sure that if you do have a specific goal, whether it be, again, acquisition of muscle tissue, building your physique, or a cardiovascular goal, you reach out to and work with a coach who programs specifically based on your current performance level and also your trained state, whether or not you're detrained, having not worked out for a while, or whether or not you're an individual that has trained frequently, but maybe not that consistently or with the right approach in terms of programming, because that individual therefore be able to personalize your training specifically for yourself based on, of course, your current experience levels and where you're at from an athletic perspective as well. Really, really important. Otherwise, your susceptibility to injury increases tenfold and you will not be training optimally, let alone recovering optimally, which makes sure training is well regulated from the volume perspective and intensity perspective to ensure it does not negatively impact your work. Really, really important to focus on.